Support us with a subscription. The stories will come more often. Enjoy watching. When small-town detective Cal Wilson comes home early from a call, he finds his wife on the couch with his old high school rival, shirtless and smug. That night shatters everything he believed in. But instead of exploding, Cal does what he does best, investigates. What starts as a betrayal unravels into a town-wide conspiracy, and Cal's quiet revenge will shake the town to its core. My name's Cal Wilson, and if you asked anyone in this small Texas town, they'd tell you I had the perfect life. Solid job, beautiful wife, house on a quiet street, the whole package. But none of them knew what was coming. Julie and I grew up together, from bike rides and scraped knees to prom and college applications. We were always a team. We weren't just high school sweethearts. We were partners. We built a life based on years of shared moments and trust that felt unbreakable. At 32, I was a detective in a sleepy department where the biggest drama was the occasional bar fight or missing lawn gnome. I liked it that way. Quiet meant safe. Julie worked as a paralegal at a local law office. Smart, dependable, always the one who had my back, or so I thought. Back in high school, there was this guy, Jimmy Green, son of the mayor, quarterback, golden boy, the kind of guy who never really grew out of his Letterman jacket, if you know what I mean. He used to double date with us back in the day, always flirting with Julie like it was some kind of joke. He'd flash that smug grin, knowing he could get away with anything. Julie used to laugh it off. I let it slide. We were kids. Fast forward a decade and not much had changed, except Jimmy's dreams of NFL stardom ended with a busted knee. Naturally, Daddy fixed everything and gave him a nice, shiny job at City Hall. Nepotism wrapped in a local government badge. I had to see him more than I wanted. Joint cases, budget meetings, community events. Every time he looked at Julie, that old gut feeling came back. But I told myself I was being paranoid. The truth is, Julie and I weren't struggling, at least not in the way people think. We still laughed, we still had dinner together. But my job kept pulling me away. And sometimes love doesn't die in explosions, it just starves slowly. One Friday night we had plans. I picked up her favorite takeout, grabbed a bottle of wine, and was ready to make up for all the missed moments. But then duty called. A domestic disturbance a couple blocks away. All units tied up. Barton, the sheriff, asked if I could handle it. I didn't want to go. I looked Julie in the eyes and promised I'd be back before midnight. She smiled and said it was fine. By the time I got home, it was a little after 11. I walked in, ready to apologize again, only to find Jimmy Green sitting on my couch. My couch. Julie was next to him, freshly showered, laughing like nothing was out of place. Jimmy looked too comfortable, the kind of comfortable that tells you he's been there before. I didn't start a fight. I didn't yell. I kissed my wife on the forehead and thanked her for being patient. Then I turned to Jimmy and said it was time for him to go. He made a weak excuse about Cynthia, his wife, being out of town and just wanting company. I didn't care. He left, and that should have been the end of it. But something inside me shifted. From that night forward, I started watching. Not just Julie, but the patterns. The calls that pulled me away. The weekends she suddenly wanted space. Cynthia, Jimmy's wife, started looking more and more worn out. We'd chat here and there when we crossed paths, and I could tell she knew something too. I wasn't ready to accept it. I didn't want to believe my wife, the girl I grew up with, the woman I built my world around, would ever betray me. But denial only lasts so long, especially when you're a detective and every red flag starts looking like a case file. This wasn't just about a strained marriage anymore. Something bigger was happening, and I could feel it just under the surface. I didn't know it yet, but I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being set up. And the people pulling the strings weren't just wrecking my home, they were playing with my life. And I was about to play back. 2 weeks after that strange Friday night, I found Jimmy's truck parked outside our house again. It was a Sunday morning. I was coming back from an early run. He was gone by the time I stepped him through the door, but Julie was in a great mood. Too great. That's when I started keeping records. I didn't tell her I was watching. I logged dates, times, even patrol reports that mysteriously pulled me away from home, always at convenient moments. I even checked City Hall schedules. Jimmy's shifts started changing to match up with Julie's free time. Coincidence? Maybe, but I didn't believe in those anymore. Then came the call from Cynthia. It was a Sunday early, and I hadn't even poured my coffee when my phone rang. "Cal, you need to come. Now!" She didn't explain. Her voice was shaking. I arrived at the greenhouse in under 5 minutes. Julie's car was out front. Cynthia was pacing the lawn like a storm. "You don't know, do you?" she said before I even stepped out. "Know what?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to the car. "You need to go inside." I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I walked straight in and headed to the bedroom. They didn't even lock the door. There they were, my wife, Jimmy. The bed I'd shared with Julie for 8 years. Neither moved. Neither said a word at first. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't touch my weapon. I just pulled out my phone and took 4 photos. That's all I needed. Julie covered herself and started mumbling excuses. Jimmy just sat there like a kid who'd been caught stealing. I stepped out and called Cynthia in. "You knew?" I asked her. "I knew today," she said, shaking. "She told me you were fine with it, that you knew and didn't care." I stared at her. She said, "What?" "That you worked too much, that you agreed she could see Jimmy on the side." That lie hit harder than the cheating. Julie came out wrapped in a blanket, talking about how we could fix things. Jimmy tried to stand in my way when I suggested Cynthia come stay with me for a while. That was a mistake. I didn't even have to unholster. One look shut him up. "How long?" I asked him. He glanced at Julie. "Since the night you got called to Sue Roberts' place," he said. I nodded. The night I thought Julie was waiting for me with takeout. The night I saw Jimmy on my couch. That night. Julie reached for me, started crying, but I didn't move. "You still love me?" I asked, repeating her words. "And that's why you brought him into our bed?" She had no answer. That day, Cynthia packed a bag and came with me. We didn't talk much on the ride back. She sat quietly, her hands trembling, her eyes locked on the road ahead. When we got to my house, I made 2 calls. First, to Dennis, my cousin, the best locksmith in 3 counties. Then to my sister Liv, who handled accounts at the local bank. By sundown, Julie was locked out, and the joint accounts were rebalanced. I bought a new bed, tossed the old one outside myself. Cynthia didn't say a word as movers brought in the replacement, but when I gave her a key, she looked at me like someone who'd just been pulled out of deep water. I told her she wasn't a guest. She was safe. That night, as we sat on the porch, Cynthia finally opened up. "He controls everything," she said. "The money, the house, the car. I stay because he says if I leave, I get nothing." She rolled up her sleeve. A bruise. Fading, but still there. "He hit you?" "Not always, but often enough." That changed everything. This wasn't just infidelity. This was abuse. And now it was a case. I called Barton, told him I needed time off. He didn't argue. He knew something was wrong. But what I didn't know yet was that Barton had known about Jimmy and Julie for months. He helped make sure I worked late shifts, weekend calls. He said he was trying to give them space to work it out without hurting me. That revelation would come later. But even now, the pieces were falling into place. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating spouse. I was standing in the middle of a small-town machine built on power, lies, and protection for the wrong people. Jimmy was just the beginning. Cynthia and I sat up late that night. No plans, just talking. We weren't a couple, not yet, but there was a closeness between us that didn't need labels. We weren't just hurt people bonding over betrayal. We were partners now, and neither of us was planning to let this go. Not quietly. The next morning, Cynthia and I hit the ground running. Our first stop was my sister Olivia's office at the bank. She was already waiting. No small talk. I asked her to move 75% of the joint account into a new account in my name. She didn't even ask why, just said, "About time," and started typing. I called my brother-in-law Phil next. He's a family lawyer, sharp, fast, and doesn't miss a trick. When I told him I needed divorce papers drawn up fast, he asked, "Yours or hers?" I said, "Both." I handed over the photos and laid out what we knew. Phil's face darkened. "This isn't just adultery," he said. "This is conspiracy." Cynthia was quiet through the meeting, but when Phil asked if Jimmy had ever hit her before, she rolled up her sleeve again. "More than once," she said. Phil didn't blink. We'll press charges. That bruise, the photos, your statement, that's enough. That night I told Julie not to come home. She tried to argue, claimed she still loved me, threatened divorce herself. I told her it was already in motion. I wasn't cruel, but I was clear. You lose everything in this state when you're the one who cheats, I said. And I have proof. She went quiet. Later that evening, I found myself sitting beside Cynthia, planning the next steps. We weren't sure what kind of fight Jimmy would put up, but we were preparing for war. Cynthia handed me a flash drive she'd been keeping. Records, bank transactions, text messages, everything Jimmy never thought she'd save. I didn't know what I'd do with it, she said, but now I do. I made copies. The next morning, we walked into Sheriff Barton's office. Cynthia showed him the bruise. I showed him the photos. Barton looked like he'd aged 10 years in a minute. You knew, didn't you? I asked. He didn't deny it. He claimed Jimmy told him we had an understanding, that Julie and I were still working things out. Barton admitted to scheduling me for odd shifts, keeping me away on purpose. He called it a favor. I called it betrayal. You're going to file the charges, I said. Properly. No cover-up. He nodded, ashamed. But I wasn't done. I'd already scheduled emails to every major news outlet, time-stamped with attachments. I gave Barton a choice. Do his job, or I'd make sure everyone knew he didn't. That afternoon, Jimmy was arrested. The mayor tried to interfere, claimed it was a misunderstanding, said Jimmy would never lay a hand on a woman. But Cynthia's bruises and my photos said otherwise. And then the real bomb dropped. Phil's private investigator uncovered a phone recording. In it, the mayor and Jimmy discussed me. How to keep me busy, how to give Julie and Jimmy space, how to eventually remove me from the picture. They even joked about firing me if I became a problem. It wasn't just an affair. It was a setup. They used Barton. They used the sheriff's office. They used City Hall. And they all thought they'd get away with it. Until now. Phil sent the recording to the judge. The same afternoon, Judge Reinhold signed arrest warrants for both Jimmy and the mayor. I joined Barton in the cruiser that night. No sirens, no lights. We showed up at the mayor's home just as they were finishing dinner. The mayor answered the door and barely got out a word before Barton read him his rights. Jimmy didn't resist. He looked stunned, like it never occurred to him there'd be consequences. As they were loaded into the cruiser, I turned to Jimmy. You know, I said, if you'd kept your hands to yourself, none of this would have happened. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Back at the station, I sat in the interrogation room across from Jimmy. Cynthia sat beside me. I hit play on the recording. His face turned white. This isn't admissible, he stammered. Doesn't matter, I said. We're not trying to convict you with it. We're just going to show it to every news station and political... It didn't take long to find inconsistencies. Money missing, contracts signed without oversight, favors exchanged for silence. What started with an affair turned into a full-blown federal investigation. As for Barton, he cooperated. He testified under oath, admitted his role in the cover-up, and handed over internal records. He was allowed to finish his term quietly, but his career was done. He resigned months later and faded from public view. Julie tried to reach out again. She called, texted, left voicemails. I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. She showed up at my house once, unannounced. Cynthia was home with me. Julie looked worn out, like someone trying to wake up from a nightmare. She said she wanted closure. I gave her 10 minutes. I never planned for this to happen, she said. No one ever does, I replied. I didn't know how bad it was. With Jimmy. I didn't know what they were planning. But you knew he was married, I said. And you still let him in. You still lied. She nodded silently. I told her the divorce would go through in a matter of weeks. She wouldn't be left with nothing. The court awarded her the car, a portion of our savings, and enough to start over. That was more than she deserved. But I wanted a clean break. Julie asked if we could talk again someday. I didn't answer. That night, Cynthia and I packed up the last of Julie's things and left them at her sister's house. No more contact, no more drama. Meanwhile, Cynthia's divorce was finalized. Phil handled it himself. Jimmy lost the house, the accounts, and all access to shared property. Cynthia walked away with everything she was entitled to, and then some. She didn't celebrate, she didn't brag, she just moved forward. A few weeks later, Janet Green, the mayor's wife, reached out. She had received the evidence packet I'd sent anonymously. Instead of denying anything, she came to my house in person. She thanked me. I had no idea how deep this ran, she said. I thought Fred was just distant. Turns out he was dangerous. She filed for divorce the next day. Phil agreed to take her case too, said it was the first time he'd ever represent the wife of a man he once voted for. By the end of the month, the judge overseeing the investigation into Fred Green's administration resigned. More subpoenas went out, more files were seized. What started as a personal betrayal had become a political reckoning. The town changed, old loyalties fractured, new alliances formed. People who used to turn a blind eye started asking questions. And for the first time in years, accountability didn't feel like a joke. Cynthia moved in with me permanently. It wasn't official, no big announcement. She just never left. We didn't rush into anything romantic. We just lived, side by side, quietly, honestly. We made dinner together. She got back into real estate. I took a short leave from the department, then returned on my terms. The only thing left was closure. Julie signed the final divorce papers in Phil's office. Her attorney didn't argue. He saw the evidence, knew it was a lost cause. When we walked out, she turned to me. I did love you, she said. I believe you, I replied, but you didn't respect me, and that's what killed it. She nodded, then left. 30 days later, the divorce was final. Jimmy tried appealing his house arrest, denied. His funds were frozen, his political contacts disappeared. Even his father's connections couldn't save him. Word got around that he wasn't handling prison life well. No one felt bad. Fred Green faced the heaviest charges: fraud, obstruction, conspiracy. He pled guilty to lesser charges in exchange for reduced time, but it didn't matter. His reputation was gone, his legacy shattered. Janet became the unofficial voice of change. She joined a local civic group, pushed for new transparency laws, and started holding city hall meetings open to the public. She was the first person to say the town needed new leadership, and she meant it. At the next election, she ran for mayor, and she won. That left one last decision: me. After Barton resigned, the town needed a new sheriff. The council offered it to me unanimously. I said yes. Not out of revenge, not out of pride, but because this town needed someone who'd stop looking the other way. A year passed, the headlines faded. Reporters moved on to the next scandal. But the town didn't forget. People still whispered about the Green family when passing City Hall. Some looked embarrassed for ever trusting them. Others just felt relieved someone finally stood up to them. Cynthia and I got married in a quiet ceremony 6 months after the dust settled. Her family came in from out of state. My sister walked her down the aisle. Phil officiated. No big speeches, just vows that actually meant something. Julie didn't show up. I didn't expect her to. I'd heard she'd moved out of town shortly after the divorce was finalized. Last I heard, she'd taken a job in Austin and was dating a guy who worked in finance. Someone clean, quiet, good for her. I didn't hate her. I didn't feel much of anything. As for Jimmy, he stayed locked up. House arrest turned into federal time after more charges came through: misuse of public funds, conspiracy, and a handful of sealed counts that never made the news. Whatever the full story was, it kept him off the streets. No one fought to get him out, not even his mother. Janet Green, now Mayor Green, was everything her husband wasn't: honest, transparent, fierce. She made the office work again. Budget meetings became public. Hiring went through fair boards. She even dissolved the position Jimmy used to hold. Said the town didn't need another assistant to the mayor, whose job was shaking hands and taking bribes. We stayed in touch. Thursday mornings at the diner became tradition. 2 cups of coffee, a plate of eggs, and an unfiltered conversation about whatever was broken that week. She trusted me because I never once tried to protect Fred or Jimmy. I told her the truth and stuck to it. Cynthia started her own real estate firm. It took off fast. Turns out people in town liked working with someone who didn't smile through lies. She hired 2 assistants and handled properties across the county. Some clients came just because they'd seen her name in the news. Others because they respected what she'd survived. We bought a house together. Not the old one. That chapter was closed. This one had a little land, a garden in the back, and enough room for the family we were building. A year after the wedding, we had our daughter. 2 years later, our son. I never expected to be a father. Not after everything, but Cynthia made it easy. She was calm where I used to panic, steady where I used to react. Being with her never felt like a rebound. It felt like I'd finally landed where I was supposed to be. I stayed sheriff. It wasn't about the badge. It was about protecting people who didn't have the power to fight back, like Cynthia once was, like I almost was. My office stayed clean. No shortcuts, no favors. If someone messed up, they got booked, even if they used to be my friend. Some people whispered that I was only sheriff because of the scandal. They said I rode the fallout to a promotion. Maybe I did. But I never asked for what happened. I just didn't run from it. That was the real difference. Julie called once, 2 years after the divorce. I was at the station. She left a voicemail saying she was married again, pregnant, said she hoped I was doing okay. I deleted it. Not because I was angry, because I was done. I didn't reply. I had Cynthia. I had my kids. I had a life built on truth, not promises that cracked under pressure. The old version of me, the one who believed in unconditional love, who thought loyalty was enough to hold everything together, he's gone. What's left is better, smarter, stronger. This town learned something too. Power doesn't make someone untouchable. Lies don't last forever. And eventually, even the ones who think they've buried the truth deep enough end up choking on it. The Greens, they lost everything. But so did I once. And then I found something better, something real. Now, when I walk through town, people don't call me the guy whose wife cheated. They call me sheriff. And I walk tall knowing I earned every step.